I'm Jess from the Chrysalis Centre and I'm joined with Rob here today. Rob, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Rob May, work for Merseyside Fire and Rescue.
Good stuff. I've got a few questions to ask you about different things about being a man, the generations, how we can help future generations and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the first question I wanted to ask you is, there's a lot in the media targeting harmful male behaviour. How does that affect you as a man when you hear those things?
I guess it affects me because it kind of tarnishes you with the same brush, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone assumes that we're all the same when, you know, somebody does something or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, it must be like a male thing. So I guess it's quite upsetting because it's, you know, it's not nice. It's your gender, do you know what I mean? And then people look at you differently. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not everyone, it's just the certain people. Like,
yeah.
What do you feel are the main issues for men nowadays with like society and media included and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, there's a lot of issues, isn't there, for everybody, not just men, but I think there's definitely a lot of pressure because everybody says it's okay to talk and share and this and this and this, but I think it's still a very taboo thing for a guy to open up. And I think there's a lot of pressure to just get on with it, crack on with it. You know, you've got to be strong and, you know, be there for everyone and just do your job. And I think obviously as well, you know, around the social media and a lot of all these other things and, you know, influencers online, and there's this image of like perfect people and you don't measure up to it ever. So it's like you go through a lot in yourself because you probably have an idea of what you want to be or what you want to look like or whatever, and then you're not that. Do you know what I mean? And then you can't talk about how much it's upsetting you because people maybe mock that or whatever, so you can't really open up or speak, and then you start getting stressed and all these other issues come from it.
Yeah. So going on for that, the kind of a big stereotype for men in our society for quite a long time has been the provider, strong, reliable, tough. Do you think it's still as prevalent nowadays? And what do you think effect that has on like younger generations as they're growing up?
To be honest, I mean, I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be. I think there's obviously there's a lot of strong women who are kind of taking a lead on a lot of this stuff, and they're very public and things like that. So you can kind of see that the tables are turning a little bit, and definitely if you take the fire and rescue service, for example, so my daughter was born 4 years ago, and I was the first guy to take shared parental leave. So my partner at the time, she took 6 months off, and then I took 3 months off, and she went straight back to work because she's the higher earner in the house. She, you know, at that time, she's the higher earner in the household. So, and it's always been that way for me. So I think I've always been around, you know, stronger women who are the predominant provider in that, do you know what I mean? And especially in the fire and rescue service as well, we have a lot of strong females here who are taking the lead, and because I'm around it, it doesn't seem like it's as prevalent to me anymore. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's kind of like beneficial, really. So you get to see a different view. How do you feel like it would be for people who are in the opposite situation? Do you think it would be a lot of pressure on a young boy growing up with all the standards that have been set by previous generations?
I think it's tough, isn't it? Because I think people want equality, but they also still want you to be a man. So it's like, and the typical stereotypical male of, you know, I will provide this, I will do that, I will go to work at this time till this time. So you want to get away from that, but you're almost still expected to do that, because if you don't do it, then you're less of a man. So it's kind of like contradictory in a way, and it's confusing because what do you want? What do you have to be? Do you know what I mean? So you want to kind of be. You want to hold your own. Obviously, you want to provide for your family. You want to provide for yourself, and obviously, you want to push whoever else is in your life to do good things too. But then how far, it's a fine balance, isn't it? And then you kind of lose yourself a little bit, I think, and what is the expectation? So I think you end up in a situation where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do what feels right for me, and I don't want to look at anything else because it's too confusing.
Yeah. Do you think that there are barriers for men who want to focus on things like self-care, speaking about what they're going through, taking time off from work if they're struggling? Do you think there's more barriers for men than there is women?
I could only give you my perspective on it, and for me, I think that the only barriers that may be slightly different is the barrier that you put in place yourself and assume that you can't take care of yourself in that way. So recently I went through a bit of a rough patch with my own mental well-being and stuff like that, and the amount of support that was offered to me was insane. And it was kind of like, how much time do we need? You step away from the workplace and things like that. So there was definitely no barriers in that sense. But again, being a typical male, if you want to say, I was like, I don't need that, I'm okay, I'll just kind of talk it out, and I'm still going to go to work and do, because but again, I think that's just, it wasn't to do with just, oh man, it's like, that was better for me to do that because I feel like I need that stability in my life. But as far as, I think it's just a lot more expected that guys will keep their mouth shut and crack on. And even though you blatantly know they're struggling, it's like you'll just crack on with it until you don't crack on with it anymore, and then you end up in a crisis. when women just say, I'm having an off day today, before it ever gets to that point, it's like you'll know when a female is normally upset.
It's a lot easier. I think it's a lot easier for women to show their emotions than men. I think it's getting better, but I still think it's pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a very emotional guy. I mean, Julie will tell you, but I don't come across many people who are like that, and sometimes it can be like detrimental as well. It's not always a good thing. It's kind of like you've just got to practice it. It's a skill, isn't it? Really know when and when not to use it, kind of thing, and when to express yourself and when not to. So
yeah. So your experience was it your family who was like kind of accepting and supporting of when you were struggling as well as your workplace?
Yeah, so I think because I do communicate, so that like they know what's going on. It's not a shock. So I think the support that you get from like my team around me, the work, the bigger workplace itself, especially my line managers, they know me very well, so they know when I'm off, and they'll be the first ones to tell me that. But my family also know me very well, so the support network is massive because they can see things before you even notice, and then you can be mindful of, I'm slipping a bit. Do you know what I mean?
What do you think your advice would be for a young boy who's struggling with the mental health, maybe self-esteem problems, confidence, struggling with like relationships? What would be your overall advice for a young boy right now?
I think you've definitely got to figure out kind of who you are and what you want to be, if that makes sense. And you need to find somebody that you trust that can help level your head as well, because when you're in your own head, you're only going to tell yourself your own information, which could be right, it could be wrong. You've got no benchmark or nothing to measure it against. So it's often difficult to start to talk, but once you do, you can generally rationalize what's going on. So I suffered as a young kid. Obviously, we spoke about it last time with a lot of things, and self-esteem and body issues and things like that. It's still in my life. I'm 37 and I'm still struggling with it. So, but one of the things I would say is to have good people around you that can bring you back down from the heightened sense of, hating yourself and not wanting to, you're not comfortable in yourself and you don't know what to do, and maybe you can't figure out the next step. But I would say just focus on the little things, focus on the little steps, and speak to people. Just have people around you that care about you and who are gonna just help you get to where you need to be, because it's it is achievable. It's just sometimes it's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be overwhelming for a lot of people, really. How do you feel the concept of masculinity has changed throughout your lifetime?
I think I'm not sure like the masculinity has changed. I think because we've pushed for equality so much. It's more that we're more focused on inclusion and stuff. So we've I guess like you said before, you've got a stereotypical male that didn't change. I think the only thing that changes is that you've got to kind of look at, you assume, right, well, I'm a guy and I can do this, this, and this. Whereas it's kind of like, well, that's not right. You know what I mean? It's got to be the best possible human, regardless of gender. So I think like the masculinity side of it, that's still a bit confusing to me. But it doesn't feel like that's changed. I feel like the only thing that's changed is that everybody is like being more aware of other people, which is nice because it's not all about you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And as this interview is mainly for the 16 days to eliminate violence against women and girls, I've got one final question for you. What education do you feel needs to be put in place to stop male violence against women and girls?
Yeah, of course it does. I think it should be spoken about, because if it's not, then when it happens, everyone's kind of shocked by it and they didn't know why. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think if you look at education in the sense of what are the steps leading up to an actual assault or actual control in relationship or whatever, and maybe learn how to kind of spot triggers, spot patterns, spot behaviours, and also like I said, the support network for somebody that is struggling, because ultimately I'm not sure about the psychology of why, maybe some people are just born that way and they're just violent. I don't know, but a lot of it is kind of situational, and I think it spawns from like things that you've never dealt with, and that's how it comes out of you. So some people it comes out in different ways, and that's one of the ways it comes out, which is obviously not acceptable. But I think if you educate people on that it happens, this is kind of, we've noticed patterns, this is how it happens and why, and then obviously you're more mindful of it. So if you spot it in somebody else or even in yourself, you could be like, oh, I'm getting agitated and I'm snapping at people. That's maybe like the first or second step of actually physically assaulting somebody. Then you could be mindful and maybe get help before you get to that point and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because if we ignore it and there's no education, it's going to keep just happening, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So do you think that the younger the education can happen, the better?
Definitely. If you look at, like I said, my little girl's 4 and she's in nursery learning all sorts of stuff that it blows my mind, because I know I didn't go through those things. So she's coming home talking about different cultures and traditions and what they're celebrating, and even stuff like that. So if you're teaching at a young age about that, there is different cultures, there's different, people in the world, then when she grows up, she's going to be a lot more accepting without knowing why. She just accepts that everyone's different, and that's a good thing. And it can be the same with violence and stuff. I mean, it's difficult with children because you can't, the graphic side of it is obviously upsetting and things like that. So I'm not sure where you would start or pitch it, but I think you almost want to kind of, when they get old enough to understand, it's already embedded in them, like in the morals and how it affects people and things like that. So again, I think setting it up, I wouldn't know, but I think it's very important because they talk about everything else. So why not? It's an issue. It's a massive issue. You know what I mean? And I think it's an issue as well to teach people, like whether male or female, that you shouldn't accept that at a very young age, because obviously I've accepted a lot in my life. And I shouldn't have accepted those things. I should have, stood up for myself a little bit more and been like, hang on, I can actually step back from this situation rather than be a victim of it. And that's really difficult once it's got to a certain point. I think it's kind of like a point of no return, isn't it? But if you identify it before, maybe you can do something about it before it gets to a certain point as well. So you can take a lot of ownership yourself and go, that's not a good situation for me. I can see some red flags, and rather than be swept up in the whole thing. And again, male or female, because obviously it happens both sides. I think it's predominantly men against women, isn't it, unfortunately? But
yeah, that's great. I think that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you for speaking with me.
That's okay, anytime.
Yeah, so I'll just end the